Okay, we're going to study a parable this morning. My favorite topic. It's easy to do, and so that's what I'm going to do. And but I want to review a couple things on what gets us to this parable. So, how many tribes of Israel were there? 12. And they were named after the sons of
Jacob. For
Jacob.
the most part.
Correct. 13. 13.
Okay, now
12
Sorry
sons
about
of
that.
Jacob and 13 tribes because one of them got split in half and the other one didn't get an inheritance.
Vanessa and
okay. All right.
Egypt.
This is not college
We'll
level.
call it 12.
So let's just call it 12. Okay.
Not too complicated.
All right. And this started way back with because Jacob was the grandson of Abraham. So Jacob's name was changed to Israel. 12 tribes comes out of that. The 12 tribes eventually leave Egypt. Generations later, they enter into the land of Canaan eventually, and they are serving in that way. But then something really happens and they split. And they split around, I'm not really going to be on the dates today, but 700 to 800 years before Jesus, they split. 10 tribes called the northern tribes, called Israel. 2 tribes, Judah and Benjamin, stay where Jerusalem exists, and they're called Judah. Rehoboam, Jeroboam, all these guys going on. Now, there is a city established in the north to become the capital of the north, Israel, and it's called Samaria. And this is established by a king named Omni. Now, Omni's son was Ahab, and remember Ahab and Jezebel, okay?
Not a great guy.
Yes.
Although I think his dad might have been worse if you actually read all the stuff he did. He was a bad dude.
Bad people, bad dudes, a lot of bad leadership, introduced idolatry, worship of Baal, all these bad things that occurred up in Samaria. Now, bad things also happened in Judah. But anyway, Samaria becomes that way. And this city was built in the hill country. It's called Watch Mountain or Watchtower Mountain. And so it was a very big deal in the day. But around 722 BC, the Assyrians come in and conquer them. The Assyrians are not part of God's chosen people. They intermarry, some leave, but some stay. They intermarry, they become the Samaritans. Now, they were not very well liked by Judah and the people around Jerusalem. They were quite honestly not considered to be relatives anymore, or holy anymore, or part of God's chosen people. In fact, they were so despised that travel between Judah and Galilee was done by circumventing Samaria, which lay in between. Now, we do know Jesus did interact with the Samaritans because we hear about the Samaritan woman at the well. And Jesus was in Samaria when that happened. So the idea is there would be a road from Jerusalem down to Jericho. You'd cross the river and you'd walk north and then cross back over into Galilee, avoiding Samaria completely. And this is kind of how the situation was. Now, if we look in Luke 10, we're going to find a parable there that is one of the better known stories when it comes to the parables. I would have to say the prodigal son might be the A-list top one of recognition that most people recognize about the prodigal son. A very good message there. A different message in this one we call the Good Samaritan. Now we call it that. Jesus didn't call it that. there's probably a number of things we could call this parable, kind of like the scoundrels from the Levite tribe. Okay. We could call it, actually more accurately if we wanted to, who is my neighbor parable. Who is my neighbor parable? That's because that's the actual language used in the questioning to Jesus. Who is my neighbor? And so this was a question, and so now we kind of know the setting. And another aspect in this parable is we're going to see a dollar amount given called a denarii. Okay, a denarii would be, generally speaking, a day's wage. And we can see that actually in Matthew 20, I think it is, with the vineyard. And they are all going to be paid a denarii for their work for that day. It's a day's work, even though some worked less than others. You remember that parable, that's a whole different lesson. So the parables teach us lessons and guidance, show us and reveal things about heaven, the Father, judgment, the kingdom, etc. This is going to reveal to us who is our neighbor. Okay, very important. Now the parable actually starts in verse 30, chapter 10. But we're going to back up and see what happened just before that, starting in verse 25. Now, behold, a certain lawyer. Now, what does that mean? A lawyer, right here. What does that mean? It doesn't mean an attorney at law that we normally think of today. What would this be referring to? A certain lawyer.
Mine says an expert in the law.
What law?
Yes.
Mosaic law?
The Mosaic law, the Old Testament law, the Old law. Yes, an expert, which means he probably was referred to as a rabbi, a scribe, a Pharisee, anything like that. He's an expert in the law. Those are the ones that like to trick Jesus, okay? So they're like, this guy, who is this guy? Jesus. He's a common guy from Galilee, no kidding? Mm-hmm. So an expert comes along and said, I'm going to ask you something, and you're going to get messed up on this because this is an important question. And so the teacher said, he said to him, Teacher, what shall I do to inherit eternal life? Pretty broad question. And Jesus said to him, what is written in the law? How does it read to you? And he answered and said, Thou shalt love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, and with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself. Okay, that's actually two laws, right? But this is the one that Jesus actually spoke of when he was asked by another person, what's the most important commandments? And these are the ones Jesus listed. So, loving God, loving your neighbor as yourself. Okay? And Jesus said to him, well, you've answered correctly. Do this and you'll live. Just do that. We're good. But wishing to justify himself, he said to Jesus, well, who's my neighbor? Who's my neighbor? And that's the whole crux of this parable. So this guy's like, I want to know how far this thing really goes. I mean, who is my neighbor? Anybody? Just the nation of Israel? My friends? Just those in this tribe or that tribe? Okay? All right. Here we go. Jesus replied and said a certain parable to him. A certain man, doesn't say any more about that. A certain man, we don't know anything about this guy, other than he's a man. He was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho. Now, why does it say down? Usually when we say down, we mean south. Right?
Downhill.
Everybody goes up to Jerusalem because it's uphill.
So Jerusalem's higher
Yeah.
than Jericho. And And where is Jericho exactly? If Jericho's in the mountain, Jerusalem's in the mountain, Mount Moriah, Mount Zion, where's Jericho?
Plain.
It's in the plain, which is also where? Where's the plain? That's where Sodom and Gomorrah was.
To the east.
It's the way?
To the east, yeah.
It's to the east, exactly. It's to the east. Jericho's the one where they blew the trumpets and all the walls fell down. It's one of the first cities that was ever come in when Moses, when Aaron and all of them came across the river, right? So what river is that?
Jordan.
The Jordan. And the Jordan leads into what lake?
The Dead Sea, right?
The Dead Sea is one of the, isn't that the lowest area in the world?
Yeah.
It's the lowest place in the world. There's no outlet to the Dead Sea. Water comes in, but it never leaves. It only evaporates. So it gets saltier and saltier, and that's why they call it the Dead Sea. Well, Jericho's right there. So a certain man was walking down the road, the trail to Jericho. We don't know if he is an Israelite. We don't know anything about him other than what is about to happen. He fell among robbers, and they stripped him and they beat him and went off, leaving him for dead. Okay, so he's in bad shape. We know that. Now, he's in such bad shape that he's unable to take care of himself. In fact, I'm thinking he's probably unconscious. Don't you get that idea? He's just laying there, and he is in such bad shape, I'm thinking he might die. He might die. He needs help. He can't help himself, in other words. That's important. He can't really do much for himself. He's going to need someone to help him. All right? Well, in verse 31, here comes the help. Kind of like that story you hear about the guy that prayed to the Lord to rescue him because the waters were flooding him. And he's sitting on top of his roof, and the water's getting deeper and deeper, and along comes a little rowboat. You're jumping in with me. He goes, no, I'm waiting for the Lord, and everything. And finally, the guy ends up drowning after 3 or 4 people come to help him. He said, "Why did I drown?" "Well, I sent like 4 people to help you." Oh, and so anyway, here comes the guy's help. By chance, a certain priest was going down on that road, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. Now, does he mean a Catholic priest? You know, what? The guy with the white collar? No. No, this predates that. So, what does he mean? He was a priest.
A Jewish priest.
A Jewish priest.
Levi.
He is from the tribe of Levi.
The descendant of Aaron.
The descendants of Aaron, right? It was Aaron's rod that budded, chosen of God, and Moses set apart the tribe of Levi for what purpose? A very special one.
Serve the temple.
To serve the temple and the tabernacle as priests and as caregivers for the tabernacle. They were in charge of that. And they would be provided for by the other tribes. Okay? They were to be the priests and or workers for the temple and the tabernacle. They were there to care for all of that. And they were set apart. No other tribes had priests. What does it mean in the Hebrew letter when Jesus is called a priest? Was Jesus from the tribe of Levi? What tribe?
Judah.
Judah. What tribe was David from? Judah. Jesus is a descendant of David, the tribe of Judah, and he's referred to as a priest. Let's look at that really quick here. I think it's Hebrews 7. I don't know if Hebrews is still in my book. Here it is. So, for this, Melchizedek, king of Salem, priest of the Most High God, who met Abraham. Now this goes back a ways. Abraham, way back. And then we finally get down to, and those indeed of the sons of Levi who received the priest's office. Let's see, where is it that I'm looking for here? Help me, help me. Another priest to arise according, okay, in verse 11. Now, if perfection was through the Levitical priesthood, what further need was there for another priest to arise according to the order of Melchizedek and not be designated according to the order of Aaron? And that is speaking of Jesus. Jesus was a priest after the order of Melchizedek, who was not a Levite. Predates Levi by a long ways. Jesus was special. So here comes a Levite, a priest. He sees the man in need. It says that he sees him. He notices him. He realizes something and chooses to walk on past on the other side of the road. Not only, I mean, just like, ooh, and just goes around. And I've heard people say, oh, well, it's probably because he was ceremonially clean and this and that, blah, 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 blah. But Jesus, I think, is saying here, there's more important things in life than just getting the law obeyed perfectly. If you have to become ceremonially unclean to help someone, that is of a higher level. That man is your neighbor. Okay? Then, likewise, in verse 32, likewise, a Levite. Now, he doesn't say he's a priest, but he's from the same tribe as the priest. Someone that cared for the tabernacle. These are important people. These are people that are set apart from the other tribes. They're set apart for a purpose. So Jesus is really careful how he's doing this.
And the Levites and the priests are not just, I mean, their primary function is serving in the tabernacle and in the priest's case offering the sacrifices, but they are also set up as the justice system of Israel. That's why they created the cities of refuge, which is where if there's a criminal case, basically you go there. They were the ones who made the decision. The Levites were supposed to teach the people the law, and that's why they lived among them. They didn't just all live where the tabernacle was because they were supposed to be modeling for the people what God wanted them to do and teaching them the specifics of the law, and not just this monk class off on their own, worshiping at the temple and not doing anything else. So these are people who are supposed to be part of the lives of Israelites and worried about what's going on with Israelites.
Yeah. So this guy comes along. He's a Levite also. We came to the place and saw him. He passed on the other side. Did the same thing. Look, nope, thank you. Don't know him, don't want to. Right? All right. So Jesus is pretty careful about who he's picking as characters in this story. He's really careful about that because this is what got him in a lot of trouble. Is because he would pick characters that were really offensive to those listening. Like, so the important people passed on by. And then the killer, verse 33, he said, but then a certain Samaritan, ooh, that's gotta hurt. A Samaritan comes by. He was on the same journey. Now, he wasn't in Samaria. We're still in Judah. The road between Jerusalem and Jericho is in Judah. So the Samaritan's there. A heathen, subhuman, dog, unclean person, idol worshiper, okay? He was on the journey, came upon him, when he saw him, he felt compassion. There's the difference, right there. There is the difference, compassion. How many times can you remember, can you name any other scripture where the word compassion was used?
It's usually in the context of God showing compassion. A lot of times it's substituted that's put there in some versions as loving kindness, but it has a very similar meaning.
Okay.
I don't remember where it is, but Christ it says he sees compassion because of the spiritual condition of the people that he's talking to. And I think it's one of the times he feeds the people.
Could have been one of those. Could have been one where he needed to heal someone. He felt compassion. All right, now, do we feel compassion? What is it exactly? What is compassion?
Loving kindness. Mercy.
Feeling mercy?
You hurt for the person.
Compassion is an emotional response, right?
Showing that you care.
Right. Making a decision to care. So compassion is an emotion that we need to have. It's not just a physical action. It leads to physical action. Is there anyone you don't feel compassion to? Don't answer. But think about that. Who do you encounter on a daily basis? Who do you see out there on the sidewalks? Who do you see at the grocery store or Walmart? And you go, I don't feel, whoa, no compassion. Or people you hear about in the news, people that are doing something you don't like, you kind of have ill will toward them, okay? So this is the lesson right here. Jesus is saying, you may not like the situation, it may look really ugly, it's going to require some work, you need to feel compassion. Or you're just going to walk on the other side of the road, let somebody else deal with it. Okay, so which one of these characters would you rather be remembered for? Think of that. There's 3 characters, 2 are the same way, and 1 feels compassion. And it doesn't really matter that he's a Samaritan. He could have just said, well, another certain man. He could have used another Levite. That would have helped a little. But he used a Samaritan, and I think he did it on purpose. He's saying the people that you abhor, he's the one that felt compassion. And they're probably like, oh, well, thanks. Yeah, that's great. Let's kill him today. This is what led to really a lot of the problems that Jesus had. Was he was very plain about things, and they didn't want that. They wanted it a little bit softer, maybe a little more butter on the toast. Now this is what this man does, verse 34. And we know this story so well. We name hospitals after this guy. We do. I mean, a Samaritan is a whole contextual idiom. It has nothing to do with Samaria anymore. It has to do with people and compassion. He felt compassion and came to him, went to him. Well, he bandaged up his wounds, okay? He poured oil and wine on them, treated them. He was probably pretty bad off. And he put him on his own donkey or beast. So here you go. Put him on there. And brought him to an inn. Where? Doesn't say where. I don't know how close he was to Jericho, but I'm sure he changed his plans in order to make this happen. He said, I gotta get this guy some help, so I'm gonna take him. Did he go back to Jerusalem? Did he continue on? Was there some other place? And he took care of him, okay? So he took care of him. And on the next day, now we're overnight. On the next day, here it comes, 2 denarii. How much money was that again? 2 days' wages. Now, he gives the innkeeper. Now it's costing him something. Now, that amount in today's money would maybe be, depending on the kind of job you have, $50, $100, maybe $200 per day. Depends on the job you have. Common laborers would be probably less than $200 today, but still. So let's say he gave him the equivalent of a couple $100 or $100, $150 right in there. And you know, that's a good amount of money. If it takes you 2 days to earn that and you just like hand it over to a stranger you don't even know, for the care of someone, you have no idea if they're gonna even get better. But he said, this guy needs to stay here for a little while. So he gave him the money and said, take care of him. And if you have to spend more, well, I'll be back and I'll repay you. Isn't that nice? Do you think the Samaritan was rich then?
Maybe, but we don't know.
We don't know. The lesson isn't help people if you're rich only. Okay? So Jesus then asks the question, verse 36. Here it is. Which of these 3 do you think proved to be a neighbor to the man who fell into the robber's hands? Okay? And it's so obvious, there's no other way there's no way of wrangling your way around this answer. So Jesus set him up. This lawyer decided, I'm going to set him up for failure, and asked him questions. And Jesus finally gets to a question that is a complete setup, and there's no way out of the answer. The lawyer, the man of the law, the Pharisee, whoever he was, scribe, anybody like that, a teacher of the law, an expert in the law, just had it handed to him. And he had no other answer to give but the one who showed mercy toward him. And Jesus said, now go and do that. Just go do that. So it's really interesting that in the beginning, the lawyer said, what do I need to do to inherit eternal life? And Jesus gave him he asked him, what do you think? And he gave the right answer, but wouldn't leave it alone. Couldn't leave it alone. I know who God is, so I can love him. I don't know who my neighbor is exactly, so I don't know if I can love him. And this is where the guy made a critical mistake, because I need to know who my neighbor is. And Jesus gave an answer that no one expected. And so it's become a very well-known story and teaches a really great lesson for us and all ages on who our neighbor is. Okay, comments? Somebody move the clock forward.
I looked up in my back of the Bible about compassion, and one of the places it talks about is in Colossians 3. And it reads in verse 12, it says, and so, as those who have been chosen of God, that's us, we're the chosen. It says, holy and beloved, put on a heart of compassion, kindness and humility and gentleness and patience, bearing with one another, forgiving each other. Whoever has a complaint against any other, just as the Lord forgave you, so also should you. And beyond all these things, put on love, which is the perfect bond of unity. He's saying, if you're a chosen one of God, you need to put on a heart of compassion.
Yeah.
Period. That's just the way it is.
So Mark, do you think we're born that way? And then we fall away from it? Or do you think we need to be taught that?
I think we have to be taught that.
Yeah.
I mean, there are some times when you feel compassion toward people, maybe, but usually you're being taught by your parents or someone else that you've seen it yourself.
Yeah.
Someone showed compassion towards someone that, why did they do that? And they usually try to explain it because they need it. They're needful, and you can help them. A lot of times I think that's the way it is. So,
Yes, Sarah.
Which, okay. So I think this parable, multiple layers with what Jesus is doing here. There's a lawyer that's baiting him with this question.
We're in Luke 10, the Good
Thank you.
Samaritan.
Sorry. So he's baiting him, well, what do I need? Like asking a first grader, what is 2 + 2, right? Like,
Yeah.
I know what the answer is. Do you? You say you're a teacher, let's see. And then, okay, but who is my neighbor? Because it's not defined in the Levitical law.
Right.
And they were all about their rules and the black and the white and living in the gray. And like how far you can get to the edge with the Pharisee rules and all of that stuff. So then Jesus lays it out for him. And what he's saying is what he has been saying, that we are no longer about checklists and rules. We are about matters of the heart. It is not killing your brother. It is, do you have hate? It is not the act of adultery. It is, do you have lust? And so it starts on your insides. And this person that you abhor has got it figured out better than you do. And now I've just baited you with a question that you have to answer correctly because you know the law. We both know the answer to this. So yeah, it did lead to other things, but he's also bringing in the priesthood, because we're about ready to be told that we are a royal priesthood, set apart. And so he's bringing it full circle, and no one could see it back then.
Very good, Sarah. So it's just another proof to me that this is real. This story is real. These words are real. This is not some imaginary Shakespearean play of just someone that was really highly intellectual. There's no way that you could put this entire thing together and have it all make sense and have it all point towards something else with all these different writers and all these different ages that it was put together. So it's just another confirmation to me that this is perfect. It is the perfect law of liberty, right?
So actually, two different observations, because Sarah made me think of something that I think is kind of interesting. With regard to the priesthood, it's interesting that Jesus talks about the priests and the Levites, and he's talking to the Pharisees who didn't really like the priests and the Levites. So he kind of sets him up with a story as well, because he doesn't say a Pharisee walked by and went past. So he's kind of setting up the Pharisees. They're like, oh yeah, we wouldn't do that. And then all of a sudden, the guy that helps him isn't a Pharisee. It isn't a Jew. It's a Samaritan, and so he takes that away from them. It's also interesting to me, though, that when you look in the scriptures, we have this passage that we talk about today, that we're a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. We see that in the New Testament. That's a reference back to Exodus chapter 19, where God says to Moses, I have called these people out from everybody else, from all the rest of the world, even though the whole world is mine. I'm going to make them into a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. And then, this is in Exodus 19, and then in Exodus 20, he gives them the 10 Commandments, and Moses stays up there with them, and by the time Moses comes back down again, the people are basically having this gigantic party where they're worshiping an idol. And it's at that point that the Levites get called apart, because Moses actually calls for people to try to calm the crowd down, and the Levites rally to him and kill a bunch of people, and that's when everything settles down. And God calls them out to be his priests as a result of that, which I think is really interesting, because it suggests that originally maybe the plan wasn't to necessarily have to have a group of people that were just a specific priest, but that all of them were going to be, and then they all blew it, and so God kind of reset the plan, and now it's going to be just this group. But we have gone back to that now. And so now we are a kingdom of priests, and there's nobody here who needs to worship for us or on our behalf or in between, because Jesus does that for us as the perfect high priest, and we serve as the ministers of the covenant now. That's what the scriptures teach us. But to understand how to do that, you have to understand this principle of compassion and caring about people, which the priests in Jesus' time had lost track of, and he doesn't want his children, his people, to lose track of. And so that's, I think, why this is such a critical principle for us to be able to understand that the question isn't who is my neighbor? The question is, who am I going to behave like a neighbor towards? And like you said, he leaves us, there's no way you could possibly get the answer wrong. But, you know, we don't like the answer very much even now, so.
Yes, Chairman.
The Pharisees had a whole bunch of laws to explain everything that was in the scripture that God had given. Do we know how the Pharisee defined the neighbor? I mean, they, working, they couldn't even rub the kernels together. That was part of the law of the Pharisee, or their interpretation of the law. Do they know what was? I mean, this Pharisee, this lawyer, probably knew what the law, what was the interpretation of the neighbor, and he's just seeing if Christ knew that interpretation. And I just wonder what did the Pharisees say is my neighbor? Who did they say is my neighbor?
I don't know exactly if I can answer that exactly. I don't know if there is an answer to that. But I will tell you, it was by far smaller than what Jesus told him.
So the answer actually is, and this is kind of, you had rabbinical schools of thought. So you had different people who said different things. And it's kind of like today you have different schools of thought about what some different things in the Bible mean. That's what you had there, is you had different rabbinical schools. And so the Pharisee is setting, or the teacher of the law is setting Jesus up with a question and basically saying, you tell us which one is right when nobody can agree. So I think it's interesting that Jesus asks him, when he first comes and he says, what do I have to do to inherit eternal life? And Jesus asks him, and he gave him the answer that I think he knew would lead him into the question that he would get to ask, where he knows there's not an answer, at least as far as the Pharisees are concerned. There's 10 different ideas, 10 different definitions, and there's nothing that actually specifies what it is. And he's going to show that this guy's not all that smart, because he's never going to be able to give you a right answer, because even whatever answer he gives you is going to offend a bunch of people, and it's not going to be right. And so Jesus turns it around and doesn't even answer the question.
Well, and he does it so eloquently too, because he's not really just giving the answer, he's telling a story. And if you get the story, then he doesn't say, well, your neighbors are, okay, your first cousins, your mom,
Everyone
dad,
that lives within 100 yards of their house.
these are your neighbor's wife, of course. Anyway, he doesn't go into that list. He just said that the actions, your neighbor is anyone that is in need, and your actions. So it doesn't even say that this man that was in the ditch, I mean, he could have been just a heathen. Who knows? I mean, there's no way. It doesn't say, and it doesn't say on purpose. It doesn't say, that he was this or that. The compassion came regardless of that.
I've always taken from this parable too that in my mind Jesus is showing just equality among everybody. It doesn't matter if you're a Levite or a priest. If you're doing this one thing in this parable, compassion, you are equal in God's eyes. There's nobody above anybody else. And by this simple gesture, it's just a man and a robber. It's so vague, yet they're just average people like us. You do God's will and you're equal in his eyes.
Right. So yes, and so Jesus said, now go and do likewise. So he's speaking to us. Go and do likewise. Not easy, but necessary. We need to show that. Yes, Terry.
Well, I don't have the very first time the word neighbor appears in the Bible, but in our reading right now, we're in Exodus, and it just reminded me of some of the things that God was telling them. Now, they had speech, they had language, they were able to write. Moses was able to write anyway, I don't know about anybody else, but Exodus 22, for example, talks about what you do if you happen to steal your neighbor's ox, or if your neighbor's animal falls into a pit that you dug, using the word neighbor. So the concept of neighbor has been around for a very, very long time.
Yes.
And as far as that goes, I don't know if that answers the question about, the Pharisees or anything. They knew what neighbors could be, because they would have known this word for word.
Right.
And as far as God's plan, the story of the Good Samaritan, which I also believe is a real thing, he could have presented that any time in history. He
Right.
chose that time in history for a specific purpose, as God's plan always has a specific purpose.
So maybe it would be clearer if it said love your fellow human as yourself. Because when you say neighbor, you go, well, what's that mean though? What's that exactly mean? I don't consider people that live in Yuma to be my neighbors. But Jesus said, well, yeah, anybody is your neighbor. So, yes, Georgia.
Just curious what people think or what you all think. It's like when I see someone begging on the street, because, we donate to different things, to try to help flower them through that. But you see him on the street, well, okay, I'm looking at him, is that my neighbor? Do I, every time I see him out there every single day or whatever, what do you do? I mean, it's like, I want to make sure I'm doing the right thing. Because I think I'm already donating and go to it the right way and get your help, but is that the right way to look at it?
Okay, so, yeah, okay, thanks for that. And now we're straying off into bad land.
I can help you stray further.
So I would say that we have to use wisdom when it comes to helping and all of that. And the example that we have here is someone that was so desperately in need that it required someone to step in and help. And so I don't believe that applies to everyone that we meet on the street corners who, are basically panhandling for a living. And so if they're desperate enough to where they need our help, then we should help. So that's my perspective on it. I don't give to each one. Some people do, I've heard, so I know they do that. And it's your choice. You just have to try and make this parable work in your life. And some people are much needier than others.
That's the way I've always kind of understood her myself, to feel that. Just wondered how other Christian brothers and sisters felt about that, if that was the wrong way to feel.
Well, I rarely help the people that are there, they'll have their dogs and they'll have, different things. And I think that they're probably surviving okay. They're just poor, or they choose to be poor, whatever it is. It's a lifestyle, I think. But anyway, I have helped some that I felt were really needed to be helped. And so it's not that I just totally don't do that. Okay, we have David.
I was going to add what Mom was saying there, but I think compassion is much deeper than just, hey, here's a couple bucks to get better. That's a donation. But for compassion is if the guy's down on the ground, he's hurting, he's bleeding, you can see something's bad, and then you go to assist that person. I don't think any of us are that cold-hearted, transient or not, just to keep driving,
No, not at all. In fact, when Americans are hurting in any way, people really step up to help. Ryan, you have something?
So I think Jesus could have used many examples of the poor in that context, if he had wanted to, because there were people like that all over the place, and he chose something much more grievous. In another parable where he has the guy, the wealthy guy, and he's got the Lazarus guy who's right there in front of him, and he shows him no compassion at all, that I think you can contrast or compare the two ideas, where one is a much more immediate, you know this person, you have a different obligation than just the people that you're encountering, where it's more of, do they, are they in immediate need of help? Are they, compassion is something that's situational, I think, and it's relational as well to some extent. And Jesus is saying, look, when we see somebody in desperate need, we need to feel a relational obligation to them regardless of who they are. When we are around people that we know better and know of other issues, then we need to be dealing with that as well. But they're different circumstances and different people. So
Yeah, good. Well said, Tim.
The only thing I was going to bring up is, I rode on a fire truck for 30 years down in Phoenix. We see a lot of people panhandling on the street all the time. Whenever we knew it was very hot out, they've been out there a long time, we would always offer them water.
Yeah.
Always. A lot of times, especially the ones that have a sign that says, hungry, please help. We'd actually offer to hop in, we'll go buy you a burger. I can't tell you how many times we got denied that. If you can't give me money, I don't want to get in your truck and go get a hamburger.
Wow. Okay.
So,
Yeah.
just to ease George's mind, some are legitimate, some aren't. But that's up to you to kind of look and decide in your own heart.
But while you're riding around in your fire truck,
It was air conditioned.
you're gonna come across people that have got hurt in a car wreck.
Mhm.
And I think that's pretty comparable to what we're talking about in this.
Yeah,
area.
oh, exactly.
You know, you're there, you have to help. Someone is suffering tremendously, that's your neighbor.
And
Even though it's your job, but still, maybe the spectators have already stepped in to help.
And even the law in the AMA recognizes the Good Samaritan Act, and that's from this. So we gotta remember that, yeah, this is real.
Yeah.
And our compassion should be real too.